All right, everyone. Thanks for having us. NTAS, I really appreciate it. And already I'm overwhelmed. I forget how much I missed everyone and what a great thing it is we do. And the community is par excellence, and just seeing these faces pop up and having known most of y'all, either from TAS and everything else, it's good to see everybody. On that note, just going to get into it. So thanks again for having us. Tonight, Dr. Victor Galan and myself, we're going to be reporting on some aspects of a site we worked on a while ago. This was site 41 SM476, affectionately called the Honey Locus Site, and it's located in Northeast Texas. More specifically, the site is located just outside the thriving metropolis of Lindale in Smith County. This is the last of 6 sites worked on by Deep East Texas Archeological Consultants and Hicks Company for the 1249 Lindale Loop project. And all of this work was done on behalf of Northeast Texas Regional Mobility Authority, or affectionately called the NET-RMA. And generally, this was all in a regulatory view of TxDOT. And work at this site was actually conducted back in 2016 through 2017 with analysis and write-up still currently underway. So we're not going to get to great conclusions on this, but we're going to present on a few aspects of it. At this time, to provide some background on the local environment from a geoarchaeological perspective, I'm going to hand this over to Victor, Dr. Galan, just for a brief second.
Hello, everybody. I think I'll fill it more than a brief second. So if I go over, just tell me to stop talking. When Josh first proposed this project to me, I was intrigued and started looking at all the maps and resources that I could find, and started off the topography and the site atlas and those sorts of things, and then branched off to the geology and the soils, and then finished by looking at air photos and those sorts of things. And basically where the site is, if you see the purple right away on your screen, the red rectangle in the middle of it is the site. As you can see, it's situated on the crest of a wide upland finger coming down from an upland ridge. And it's also really close to the confluence of Birch and Duck Creeks coming in from the west and southwest, and Stevenson Branch coming in from the east. So there's this really rich marshland there that provides a variety of resources, and they have easy access to the upland resources here as well. And as you can see, there's lots of landforms around there to choose from. So there's probably archaeological sites out there as well, but these folks were here at this time period. The next thing that got me thinking is, okay, we've got this great environment, so what else might be bringing them here? And that is the geology and the soils. So geologically, all the uplands you see are Queen City sand, which is an iron-rich sand and clay formation, which provides generally decent soils for living. But on the steeper parts of the slope you see there may be actually ledges with ironstone in it. That's going to become important later on in the presentation. So I'm actually going to give you some breadcrumbs to look for when Josh starts talking about his slides. These ledges would provide rocks, ironstone rocks and other dense rocks for them to go ahead and use on the site. Within the site itself, we have Elrose fine sandy loam, which is described as only being about 30 to 35 centimeters deep, which is between 12 and 16 inches deep of sandy loam, which is good material because it drains well. And then upslope and downslope are gravelly sandy loams, which are really gravelly because think about rainwater literally washing down those slopes and carrying away that sand quickly. Whereas on the site itself, it's relatively flat or relatively gentle slope. And so the sand stays in place longer. So again, there's another opportunity to get down to the deeper Queen City sand. And then finally down there, the Keachai loam, which is down the floodplain. And it's a mixture of the sand, silt, loam, and clay, all culminating down there. And as you see, becoming very wet, becoming a different soil altogether. Let's see. Have the next slide, please. Yeah. So beyond looking at the topo and the geology and the soils, I then started looking for aerial photos and then started going back in time to see if I could find some other images. And one of the first earliest ones I was able to find was actually a soils map for Smith County. And in 1917, it showed what we now call Site 41 SM 391 as a standing structure and a road next to it. And that was about all it really showed because it was a big county map. Going forward in time, I started looking at soil surveys maps, which, by the way, if you still have the hard copies, keep them because you can't get the same information online because it shows some earlier photos of these counties. And then the Google Earth imagery, which brought us a little bit more forward in time. So the best image I could find is this 95 Google Earth image, showing, of course, the 1917 features on there as well. But as you can see on here, the site is this pasture in the middle, and there's several agricultural terraces. So it got me thinking about when are agricultural terraces really coming on and who is doing them. And really beginning in the 1930s and by the 1940s, a lot of the areas were complying with federal regulation to build agricultural terraces. And for a good reason, they're trying to keep the soil in place. So again, here we are with a L-Rose soil, which is described as shallow. And we're talking about agricultural terracing, which makes me think that this place has been disturbed a lot. Shallow soils make me think there's no real stratigraphy. Any cultures are smashed together, and the terracing may have destroyed any cultural features. And so that's what I was going for to look when, again, Josh said, let's go out there and start digging some trenches was, let's see if we can't either confirm or deny the profile. And then let's see if we can't find any good spots. Okay, next slide, please. And so what we ended up doing was going out there and digging several trenches. The profile you see down there is actually a relatively shallow one. It's only about 20 centimeters deep, what I'm calling the AP or the A horizon, and plowed. And you can see it's going through an agricultural terrace there. And below that, we have clay size minerals culminating further and further down to the B1, B2, et cetera. And you can also see that the amount of gravel and the kind of gravel increases with depth. So again, here's another one of those little things to look at in the future parts of this presentation, is that we have the A horizon, which has been modified somewhat by historic actions. We have the B horizon, and between them is a pretty clear horizon, or a pretty clear boundary between the horizons. That's going to become important because as things move downwards, they're going to settle on that B horizon. Alternatively, that B horizon is real easy to reach for anyone digging with hand tools, even stone tools or clavicles from animals and whatnot, to get down to that horizon. Going below that is more difficult. And so when we're looking at features, we're really looking at features right at the boundary between the A and the B horizon. A lot of the graves that we found are in the B horizon, right? So people dug down into the harder stuff and then stopped, and that preserved them, right? So features we're looking for right there at that boundary. The burials are just below that boundary. And then below that, it gets pretty dense pretty quick. Okay, next slide, please. Or is that my last one? That was my last one. I'm sorry, you can go back one.
Yeah, first.
Yeah, okay. What we did was we went out there and dug a total of 15 trenches across the landform. And I think Josh has this in a later slide. And you can see that a lot of the trenches are dug across the terraces. So what I was hoping to do was see if I could see any differences in the artifacts between up terrace, on the terrace, and below the terrace. While I was digging those and thinking about those, the backhoe operator said that especially back in the 30s and 40s when they're doing this, a lot of the plows were probably hand drawn. And what they would do is just gently scrape the surface and roll it over successive times and build up a low terrace. And I thought, okay, great. So I should then, if this is shallow soils, see a cut into the B horizon with the plows. And that'll show a disturbed horizon, right? And I should see a lot of soil piled up on top of these terraces. And in some cases, we actually do see that. Let's see. And then, yeah. So then we went in there, we started digging the trenches, and we found that some of them went down to about 70 centimeters or about 28 inches, a little more than 2 feet. Some of the other ones only went down about 20, 30 centimeters. And again, the increasing gravel down there made me stop digging. At that point, we're below any kind of cultural setting. The model that I have up top there shows that what I just described. Basically, there's an area that's cut a little bit to create the terrace on the upslope side. There's an uncut area, followed by, again, a successive cut area, ag terrace, uncut area going down the slope. Okay. And I think that's about all I got on there. Just as we look through future slides, look for the depth of the soils to the features we found, the intactness of the clay, and then kind of get an idea of the kind of dirt we're digging in and where the features are being found. Okay, Josh, that's all.
Alrighty, so just a brief history of our investigations. The site was actually first recorded during archaeological survey of a Gulf South proposed pipeline by Perennial Environmental Services. And during this work, it was noted that the site was within the shared right-of-way of both their pipeline corridor and the 1249 roadway, which at the time was just a proposed project. Following this discovery of the site, Perennial did coordinate with the THC, who requested additional work. And as you know, sometimes it happens, Gulf South just elected to avoid the impacts through redesign. And at that time, so since it was within the 1249 right-of-way, on TxDOT's recommendation, it became the regulatory lead reviewer of the project. They decided to treat the discovery as a post-review discovery, and it required mitigation through staged data recovery. And this initially was initiated through shovel testing, first conducted to establish the site boundary. And here we have in yellow, the first initial site boundary as recorded by Perennial. These blue dots are actually, a sampling of our shovel test, which shows that within the right-of-way of the 1249 project, we've extended the site boundary pretty significantly. Following the shoveling testing and, based on the amount of lithics and shards we recovered, it was determined that we should do some trenching. And we conducted a total of 15 trenches, excavated across the site, explored the area for intact cultural features and to better understand the site formation processes. And what we got from the actual initial trenching and the shovel test is that we got a high data yield. At which point, we decided in coordination to conduct just minimal test unit excavations. During this course, 44 test units of either individual or conjoined 1x1 meter units were excavated across the site. And we started to recover a number of several diagnostic artifacts, which both suggested woodland and Caddo occupations. And here, just from the test units and just the trenches, here you see some of the diagnostics. We initially recovered 23 specimens, and here we have a sampling of them. Again, woodland Caddo occupations. So following shovel testing, trenching, and test unit excavation, largely due to the high number of Caddo period shards recovered, it was determined in coordination with TxDOT and THC that a magnetometer survey should be utilized to identify potential features associated with the Caddo habitation. This work was conducted by Chet Walker, and during the course of his mag survey, 11 anomalies were identified. However, none of these were actually patterned in a manner that were indicative of house structures. So it was determined that these mag anomalies should be investigated through large block investigation. In our next slide here, we show in the red are areas of large block excavations that were conducted to identify what these anomalies actually were. And essentially, again, they determined that these were not, post holes, patterning, stains, or pit features that would be indicative of Caddo occupation. So what ended up happening was, in conjunction and additional coordination, was just based on the shard counts that we've got from the test units and the trenching, and just based on frequencies alone, it was determined that there was an area of Caddo locus or Caddo occupation, Caddo use, that was pretty much at the center of our landform, at the center of our site. This is depicted in the blue square here that you see on your screen. So at this point, in conjunction with block excavation, it was determined that it was probably best to proceed with a little bit of minimal scraping or great all scraping of this block area in order to retrieve a high sherd count, diagnostics, and potential post-hill and other features that might indicate, the structures and associated with the Caddo component. So up here we have in the upper left-hand corner, zeroing in on how the trenches and the Caddo scraping area overplayed. To our right is actually the great all scraping in action. In the southeast corner, we have archaeologists chasing features at the BT horizon. And at the southwest corner, we have this pretty much typical what we found at the A to BT transition. A lot of ephemeral staining that we chased out as post holes. In addition, we had non-pattern burn rock, etc. So at the end of the staged investigation, basically what we captured was a number of burn rock features. We had small post and pit features, still at this point non-pattern, but what we did have was a large amount of sherds, lithic debitage, a number of stone tools, including projectile points, bifaces of groundstone. And at the very end of our scraping exercise, we did start encountering burials. We had 13 interments, and these were associated with 33 vessels. So at this point, in order to discuss the burials, I'm going to kick it back to Dr. Galan.
All right, thanks, Josh. Okay, the burials were found pretty much in three areas. Again, if you look in the blue square there, which was designated as the Caddo area, on the upper right-hand corner, that larger kind of stair-stepped area is called Block 10, in which we had 7 interments. There's an additional one out there with an 8th interment, which doesn't seem to be associated with it, and that's Block 10. And then on the far left-hand side, we have a single block there that had 2 burials in it. We called that Block 14. And then to the south of the blue square, we have a 3rd block, which was Block 15, in which we had 3 interments. Which is unusual. Typically, when you think about Caddo cemeteries, for example, one thinks of large numbers of people and concentrated together. To the next slide, please. Or you can see on the ear spool side on the left, would have an interment, which is in that square area there, which is between houses or close to a plaza. In contrast, again, to the larger cemetery, you can see over there on the right, that there are sort of rows and columns, but I think they may be organized a little bit different. If you can look in the middle of that cemetery, you see there's 5 individuals that are buried literally head to toe, which would suggest some kind of marking as to where the burials are, and possibly even some kind of kinship there. The important thing is the burials do not overlap. The burials in cemetery, again, in an isolated area, away from habitation spots versus residential interments, which show burials around houses or plazas. So what I think we have maybe is sort of a smaller family cemetery. Have the next slide. And in this, we can see Block 10 up there in the upper left-hand corner with the 7 burials there. I divided that into 2 groups, basically on their position. If you notice in the upper right-hand section of the figure there, 3 individuals are buried relatively parallel to each other, and one's not evenly spaced, but it is right on line with the others. Whereas in the lower left-hand corner there, we see 4 burials that are parallel and are evenly spaced. Likewise, in Block 15, remember to the south, and on the right-hand side of the screen right now, you see that there are 3 burials evenly spaced and parallel to each other. Block 14 has 2 burials, but again, notice that they are neither parallel or seem to be in any kind of, I mean, they are in the same orientation roughly, with heads to the east and feet to the west, but that's about it. And then the final burial, which was one that it looks like it's associated with this rock feature we have there, but it was actually found after we'd excavated the rock feature and down probably about another 30 centimeters below where the rock feature was. So I'm really kind of thinking that's more of a fortuitous association with the rock feature, not an absolute one. Let's see, next slide. Yeah, and so what we did was we had the vessels analyzed by Tim Pertola. who used about 17 different categories to describe each vessel. And he looked at basically vessel shape, vessel type are the two that pulled out to me as being ones that individuals may either have on their possession or use, or maybe made specifically for their internment. The next two characteristics that I looked at really were paste, or the temper of the vessels, and the core color. And that core color is based mostly on firing more than anything else. So we have two different sets of characteristics. I'm only really going to talk about one. And then on the far left-hand side there, we have the burial number and the block number. And that kind of brought things into association so that like burials were grouped together. We have the next one. And then basically what I did was just drew some general comparisons. It seems that we basically have bowls, bottles, jars, and only one unknown vessel, because the bullard brushed there was really just several sherds. And then within bowls, we have carnated, compound, and undefined bowls. And then just basically drew lines across those going from left to right through group 1, group 2, the same thing for group 3, and then those unassociated burials. And then within each column, for example, you can see group 1, burial 1, it only had one vessel, and it was a utility vessel. So it was incised or it was brushed, but it was not engraved or a fine wear kind of vessel. Likewise, down there on group 1, burial 12, you can see that had actually 5 vessels, 1 pointer, 1 plane, 1 fine wear, which means basically engraved. And then it had 2 jars down there, a Nash neck bended and an unidentified utility jar. So one can apply those characteristics through all the different groups. And then you can start looking at associations. And remember, groups 1 and group 2 are found in the same block. When you look at basically the numbers of vessels, the kinds of vessels, those sorts of things, you can see they're pretty evenly distributed between bowls and bottles. There's at least, a couple jars in each one, but not much. But they look very similar. Okay, that's acceptable, right? There are 2 groups that are close together. Maybe they represent one group. We're just not sure at this point. When you compare that to group 3, which was found down south and furthest away from the other 2, you can see that there's a high number of bowls. There's no bottles, and there's a large number of jars. So these guys are clearly different, just based on these characteristics. Again, they're separated by 50 to 80 meters from the other graves as well. And then finally, when you look at the unassociated graves, you see that they have very few ceramics. Only one is really typable, and that they just don't say much. And again, they're disassociated with the other ones. Let's see, next slide. And then finally, we go back to our blocks and we look at the kinds of vessels we have there. Block 14, remember how those 2 unassociated burials, has pointer engraved, which range from the 13 to 1400-ish AD range. Block 10, which had those 7 burials, I'm sorry, included pointer, Nash, and bullard. And again, pointer is at 13 to 1400 range. Maydell is the 12 to 1680 range. And then Nash is the 1400 range. So we're looking at burials, and at least in block 10, as probably being in that 1400 AD range. And then finally, down there in block 15, we have a large number of vessels, but really only pointer and Maydell incised, which again bring us to that 1400 range, which is probably acceptable also for the Maydell as well. So kind of the door is wide open on that. I still need to look at the manufacture techniques and see if we can't suss out some more information. That's about all I've got, Josh.
All right, so we're going to return real quickly to just the features, the non-burial features that we encountered during data recovery. So potential post holes, we had 14. Burn rock features, we had 24. Soil stains, 2. We're not going to discuss soil stains in this one. So as far as potential post holes, the reason why I call them potential is so we have the good. And what we see right here is staining in profile that's associated in the BT horizon, lodged into it with some nice charcoal patterning. This we take as indicative of actual true post hole. That's the good. Then we have a little bit of the bad. The diameter is the same. We've seen a few of these to where you have associated charcoal flecking, but it is discontinuous. So is this root burn or is this a post hole? At this time, it's still spurious at best. And then we have the ugly. We have staining that's lodged into the BT horizon. The diameter is good. In profile, you can see a slight distinction in soil coloring. However, the site is called the Honey Locus Site. So the Honey Locust diameter of a Honey Locust tree is about 7 to 10 to 14 centimeters. They do lodge themselves into the BT horizon. We chased out a number of these, recorded them as potential post holes, and aligning with what we had as the good and the bad, we still couldn't come up with any patterning. And here you have 3 examples of all 3 close clustered together. Feature 22 was what we depicted before as the good, feature 23 as the bad, and feature 24 as the ugly. So you can see in plan view, the distinction in how they emanate and articulate isn't that much different. And as far as burn rock features go, like I said, we encountered a number of them, 24, and we kind of divided them up into what we see as small size scatters. And this is just kind of our division. They kind of patterned between 1.4 and 9 kilograms in weight. And at our site, we had 6 of them. Here's an illustrative sample of what was pretty typically encountered as what we call a small size burn rock feature. And then we had, about 7 medium-sized burn rock features, and they generally weighed between 10 and 30 kilograms in themselves. And here we have an example of what we call a medium-sized burn rock feature. And then we had large-sized burn rock features. Generally, these weighed greater than 30 kilograms, and we had 6 at our site. And here are some illustrations of these. As you can see, these are pretty large, kind of anomalous for our region. And here's another example of one of these. And yet another one. So on these large size burn rock features, like we illustrated before, talked about before, this is with the 6th site that we worked together on between DTAC and Hicks Company. The small size features, we see at all 6 sites. The medium size features, we see all 6 sites, and they're generally pretty indicative of Caddo occupations. These large size burn rock features are kind of anomalous. Like I said, in 6 sites that we did data recovery on or testing, this is the only site we got anything at this size, this kind of pattern on. Here's another feature from plan view. So you can see that the site in diameter is about 2 meters by 2 meters when they're intact. So what do we think of these burn rock features? Well, honestly, we don't know a whole lot because we're not done with our analysis, our assessment. They do seem to pattern on the margins of the site itself. They also seem to be distinct from small and medium burn rock features and post holes in their padding or associations. They also appear to retain horizontal provenience, but they have potentially moved down to rest or to sit on the BT horizon. Now, this could be potentially cultural, where these features were dug down as a fire pit to the BT horizon and thus established. And the reason why we think this is because in excavation, a number of the individual rocks were fragmented in place. So we think this is indicative of limited or single-use events. And we also take this as a retention of integrity. As far as their use, well, honestly, we just don't know. In review of the literature for late woodland sites and Caddo sites, burn rock features aren't well documented. What we do know is that they were best identified using remote sensing. 5 of our 6 burn rock features that were large size did pattern in anomalies. We did not encounter in scraping except for 1. And unfortunately, during scraping, this truncated the burn rock feature itself, so we could not get a good read on its size in comparison. They may or may not be associated with a Caddo occupation. We did have associated diagnostics that sort of suggests that they were probably maybe more of a late woodland component, and our ratios of debitage to sherds sort of backs us up. Here are the diagnostics, and again, not a lot that we encountered in our block excavations associated with our recovery of these burn rock features. Had a number of Gary points and a single Kent point. again, these are ubiquitous across all Caddo sites. So are we drawing a correlation just based on block excavation alone, or is this an indicator that maybe these are precursors of Caddo and are late wood component? Here we have one of our burn rock features shot in with a TDS. As you can see, we have ceramics, and more importantly, the holes, or rather the green dots with the black in the middle of our post holes. So these aren't central hearths. They seem to overlap or underlap rather, where the post holes may or may not have been patterned. So they do seem to indicate a difference in occupation or use. And why do we think these are important yet underreported? Well, because they do pop up at other sites. Here is a picture, or rather a plan view I've taken from FN 244, which is a work going down at Middle Archaic project. This is a test unit that they got, and here is the southeast, or rather the northeast corner of a potential sandstone burn rock feature that is sort of similar to what we have. And honestly, for the burn rock features at this time, and for our reporting, this is all we have. So I'm going to open up to the floor for questions and comments.
All right. Thanks, Josh and Dr. Galan. I think it's a great program, and I know that that's a lot of information for some folks that aren't used to seeing what's really kind of the bulk of archaeology going on out there. And I like how you guys have found intact archaeology in a setting that was terraced, and it was probably terraced for 100 years. If you had some indication of terraces, I think you said maybe as early as 1917.
The terracing really started in Texas in the 1930s, but from what I could see GeoArc wise, I didn't see any other old terraces or any real plow scars between those. So pretty much the terraces we see there are the terraces that were probably made back in the 30s or 40s.
Okay. But it's really interesting to see a site where you have agricultural terracing, and then you're finding intact burials and intact burn rock features across that same landscape. And I think that really kind of takes us back, because as archaeologists, when we look at a modified surface like agricultural terracing, a lot of folks go, well, that landscape is totally modified. How could you find intact burials and burn rock features across a landscape that's been modified like that? So, seeing that is very significant, and for me, that's a significant takeaway. So the question I wanted to ask you, Josh and Dr. Galan is, did this project kind of change your approach to projects where you do see, landscape modifications like agricultural terracing?
Can't judge a book by its cover. I think my first impression of the site was shallow. Ag terracing made me think we're not going to find much. And maybe this area was used for hay pastures and whatnot, but it doesn't look like much has really gone on, and definitely nothing deep. Maybe some shallow disking or something along those lines. But the fact that we had intact rock features that close to the surface, I mean, as you can see, the excavator there behind him, the ground surface is only 30 centimeters above where his hand is. So that's not far at all. The rocks are probably 10 or 15 centimeters above that. So there really hasn't been much disturbance down there.
Okay, here we go. We have a question in chat from Lori Connolly. Is there anything within the actual stone geologically that can be referenced or traced to a source? Also, it's my understanding that normal faulting dropped the Texas landscape west to in an east/southeast direction of 15 to 40 feet per mile. Do you think they took advantage of the natural terracing?
Let's see. That's kind of a loaded question. The the processes that got the landscape the where it is you're right, is that it does dip to the southeast. That's because it's the creation of the Gulf of Mexico basin. And that basically tilted all the geologic strata that way. What one finds is, as you look on the north slopes, is that the more resistant strata, or the ones that have a harder, denser rock, provide steeper slopes and thereby create a ledge that actually you can harvest rocks from. Or one can go down slope, go to the nearest creek bed down the bottom of the ridge, and find more rocks that are probably going to be more intact and harder. The softer strata eroded faster and then had more gradual slopes. I hope that answers the question. It's kind of a loaded one. And remember too, that process has been going on for close to 60 million years. So that's a long time. The terraces that we see in floodplains, again, are natural. They're not cultural. And they, again, were created probably in the last 2 million years, which I did some math on this a little bit ago. If a dollar bill represented 1 year and you stacked dollar bills on top of each other to reach each year, then to go back 2 million years, you're going to have a stack of bills 200 meters high. Or if you laid that stack on its side, the length of 2 soccer fields, which is a lot of time. And those terraces were built by the streams, not necessarily by geologic faulting. Does that help?
Yes, Lori says, yes, it does. Thank you. From Doug Boyd, any chance that any of the burn rock features are boiling stone dumps?
That's, again, a good question. I don't know what would happen if you boiled one of those stones. The rock there isn't very strong. And I don't know if by heating those rocks and sticking them in water and then taking them out and heating them again, if you wouldn't fracture the rocks really quick and turn them into pebbles. Again, I didn't get the chance to really look around and see if I could find a ledge where these rocks may be coming from. But the ones that we had there on site, had been in the ground for, up to 1,200 years, let's say, if maybe not a little bit longer. And they've had all those soil processes working on them, of roots and water and animals digging in and around them. So it's hard to say if they're actually dumps. I expect a dump to actually be more scattered than in one isolated spot. I don't know if that's true or not. And maybe, Doug, you can probably speak better to that than I can about stone boiling.
Yeah, and Doug, I mean, what we see, 4 of our 5 burn rock features seem very homogeneous and patterny, both vertically and horizontally and tightly clustered. I mean, if these were boiling stones, which could be the possibility, it just seems like we'd have a more erratic dispersion of these features.
All right, we have a question from Gus Costa. Did you find any burned clay balls associated with your features?
I'm going to go with no. We did have burned clay. I think you're probably getting to perhaps some stuff we've seen at LBD. Victor, it's been a few years, but I do not remember no clay balls or any patterning, though we did have a little bit of burnt clay.
Yeah,
from the BP horizon.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing any real dog on there. And again, a burned clay ball, we didn't see anything. All those rocks were the ironstone kind of. None of them were just solid clay.
All right, we've got a question from Pat Mercado Allinger. Was there any charcoal in any of the burn rock features? Any botanical remains?
Well, these were bisected with samples collected for flotation and potential bulk analysis. We did get minimal charcoal. We have not run our entire suite of carbon dates yet, but I don't know if it's in endaphic conditions or cultural. No, I mean, honestly, there was not a whole lot of charcoal associated with a lot of these.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen a nice charcoal lens underneath one of these things. That would have been fantastic, but no such luck.
And as far as outright macroscopic, botanical, or actually for that matter, even faunal, no. We still yet to run flotation though.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I
But, but I will offer that's not alien for any burn rock feature for this area.
Well, thank you. I think that answers Pat and Tim's questions. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Do we have any questions from the floor? Does anybody want to ask Josh or Dr. Galan a question?
What was the flora and fauna like?
Well, until we run the flotation, it's actually minimal recovery. I don't think we have anything distinctly on the macro level that is floral. And if I remember right, most the faunal component probably numbered less than 10. And those could have been more, and just on the site itself, not just with these burn rock features. So our faunal recovery on the macro level was minimal, and they could have been, more recent intrusions.
Yeah, we may be lucky and get something out of the flotation of those one or two good post/pit features. Then again, we'd be lucky again.
And as an aside, I think we got lucky that we did, a mag survey. We caught these in mag survey and excavated it. Generally, I think just for the area we're dealing with, scraping is, a preferred methodology. And well, I don't know if we would have caught these intact if we did not do the mag survey first.
Now, if we didn't know where they were, we would have missed them completely.
Yeah, and so at least we do have flotation associated with bisection, plan viewing, collection, and mapping these flotation samples in and getting CVS samples, control samples from the corners of these block units that eventually, we will run and hopefully we'll get some better data.
And question from Lori Connolly. You mentioned earlier in the presentation the ironstone was significant. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, we talked about the site being there because of the marshlands and access to the uplands to those resources. Well, I think it was, like I said, just as equally possible they were there for the geology as well. There must be a ledge, or there should be a ledge around there somewhere where they can get that ironstone, and then they use that in these rock features. So maybe if we had gone across the creek, if the highway were on the other side of the creek, we might not have gotten these rock features at all. So the presence of the ironstone, the presence of the ledge there, kind of all contributed to making that site where it was. And fortunately, we missed it all, or it was missed through plowing and whatnot in the past.
All right, thank you. I don't see any further questions in the chat. Any other questions from the floor?
What did Skipper have to say? I didn't see his comment.
Oh, I may have missed it. I apologize.
Is that going to be blasphemous or witty? I don't know which.
That may have been just a comment to you guys. I don't think that went to everybody.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
What was the source of the lithics?
A little bit everywhere. There was, a number of petrified wood, which is local stuff. I don't know, Josh, were you doing the lithics and get a chance to source any of those things?
Yeah, at some point I hope to. Generally, like most of them, we know were low-grade cherts and quartzites. We haven't done any lithic sourcing or anything of that nature.
All right, thank you. No further questions here in the chat. And one more time here before we wrap up. Any further questions from the floor? Okay, I don't see any. Folks, I want to thank Josh and Dr. Galan for the program. I think this is very valuable. It gives us an understanding of the hard work going on out there behind the scenes that a lot of the professional archaeologists are involved in every day. And as you can see, there's a lot of very important information here. Uncovering things like significant archaeology in a landscape that has been agriculturally terraced for quite some time. That's a big deal. along with the actual type of archaeology that they're encountering buried in the BT horizon, no less, within the eastern part of our state. So thank you guys, and I want to wish everybody a great night, and we will see you at our next monthly meeting in April. So have a great night.